The House Education Full Committee is now in session. It's 4:30, and we will begin. Would the clerk please call the roll? Members, if you haven't signed in, make sure you sign in, punch in. Has everyone had a chance to sign in that's here? President Hakeem, we're going to wait on you. Okay, Madam Clerk, call the vote. Roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 members present. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, Representative McKenzie is here now, so add him to that. Thank you very much. Members, we're here at a special session of our committee. We normally meet on Tuesdays, you know, and this is dealing with one particular bill. Before I start, I'm going to ask us to bow our heads. I always like to start education committees with a word of prayer. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, you're the God of all creation, and we're here to serve you most of all. And we ask that you be in this committee this day, that you guide the hearts and the minds and the voices and the things that are being said on committee as we move through this process, so that we do what is in your will always. Watch over us, be with the children in our school systems and our teachers and our leaders all throughout the state of Tennessee, and watch over them this day. Through Christ's name we pray. Amen. Members, anyone have an announcement, recognition you want to make before we do get started? I see. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. I do have an announcement. Right. Have to have a reminder. We are excited to welcome the members of the Tennessee Alliance for Equity in Education for their Day on the Hill, which is powered by Ed Trust Tennessee. It's a coalition of 90 organizations and students across the state of Tennessee who work to ensure every learner in Tennessee has what they need to succeed. Ed Trust, you hear anybody in the room? We'll stand up and let us recognize you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ed Trust, and thank you for the 10 for 10 awards banquet last night. That was very, very nice. Okay, committee, I will talk to you first. We have a bill before us that we are, is one that we call the special committee for. And the rules of the committee are this. I am going to make sure you have read the bill, and I'm going to hold the discussion very tightly onto the language of the bill. I will recognize you when you have something to say. You'll get one question, one follow-up, then I move on to the next person. If we have time, we'll come back to you. We have 3 guest speakers that we're going to invite up also. So keep your comments, your questions strictly on the bill. And to the audience, everyone wants to talk about democracy and Constitution nowadays. The members of this committee every 2 years go out and convince 70,000 people in their district to vote for them. They're here because they have the majority vote in their district. They are the ones who have the right to speak in this committee. That's constitutional. That's democracy. We love having participation, but you are here to listen today. If you disrupt the committee, then I will call you down once. If I call you down a second time for disrupting this committee, well, we cannot have legitimate discussion, then I will call the question on the bill, we'll vote and go home. But I sincerely hope we're going to allow ourselves to have discussion on this bill, because there's a lot of good questions that these committee members have come to me and said they want to have proper discussion and flush this out. So I hope that you respect the process. And to begin with, if you have a sign, it's great. Hold it in front of you, because we don't want you to block the person behind you. So signs must be down in front of you, not up here where they block someone. So that's the rules. As long as we follow the rules, we'll have proper debate, and we'll discuss a bill that is important to everyone. I'm going to go to Representative or Chairman Sapicki first of all. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that debate be closed and the question be put to the pending motion no later than 6 p.m. tonight. That's my motion.
You have a motion and a second. We have 3 members who objected. That puts the question on the bill. The motion before us is that we will have proper debate, hopefully for the next hour and a half, to flush this out. And then at that particular time, we will call the question and then the members will vote on the bill. That's the motion. Madam Clerk, if you agree with the motion, vote yes. If you do not, vote no. Madam Clerk, take the vote. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 14 ayes, 4 nays.
The motion carries, and that is the motion. We will hopefully have full discussion, at least for the next hour and a half. If we end sooner, that's one thing, but we will close this down by 6 o'clock. Representative Hakeem?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can understand what you're saying in regards to how we run this, but I'll use the term if a person or some persons filibuster in the sense of just taking up that time till 6 o'clock without allowing full discussion of questions that we may have, is that, how do we deal with that? I guess what I'm asking is, are we going to be shut down before we have the opportunity to ask questions if someone gets just sort of filibuster as far as an answer is concerned?
Yeah, well, that'll be my role. I've said one question, one follow-up. You can make your comments and your questions concise. You got to stay on the language of the bill, not all the way around the world. As long as you do that, then I'll watch that and I will control that. So the motion has carried, as we just indicated. I'm now going to recognize the sponsor of House Bill 793. Got a motion to have a second. You have a motion and a second. Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have amendment coded 5269.
That is correct. Does amendment rewrite the bill?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
We got a motion to have a second to adopt. Since it does rewrite the bill, we're going to add it to the bill for proper and full discussion. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill is properly amended. You are now recognized for introduction of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Let me just hit what the differences are between what passed through the subcommittee and the amendment that is before you today. So in the subcommittee, this bill was very simple. It was one sentence in essence, with some whereas clauses, but I mean, in essence, one sentence. It just said that a local school district can check immigration status and then decide whether or not to enroll a child into that student body, just as they check residency status now, just as they check immunization records now. What this amendment would do is it would say still that an LEA may check for birth certificate, may check for immigration status, may check. It doesn't force them to do so. And then instead of jumping straight to a decision on whether or not to enroll that student, it gives an option for that family to pay a tuition. The reason that's important, and there are 2 or 3 bills in the legislature this year that do that, is that there have been study after study that shows a child that is illegally present in the United States is more than likely very recent to the United States. It does cost more to educate that child. It is not fair to the rest of the families in that community that all do pay for that entire educational structure and that system to bear the brunt of those additional expenses. However, we're leaving that decision up to the local education agency. We're leaving that up to the local school boards. That's who we're leaving that up to in this bill. What we're allowing them to do is what Plyler prohibited them from doing. In 1982, there's a U.S. Supreme Court decision that did not extend any additional rights to children that are illegal immigrants, but it did say that the states had to bear the brunt of the cost of educating those children and could not even ask whether or not those children were legally present within their jurisdiction. So I gave this example in the subcommittee, but I'll give it again here. If a child lives in Robertson County and wishes to go to school in Sumner County, they are not able to establish their residency in Sumner County. Sumner County has the option of potentially allowing that child to go to school in the county that they're not a resident of, but that child would then pay tuition to be able to do so. That's what we're talking about in this bill at this juncture. If the family chose not to pay tuition, then the school could make a decision not to enroll that student or not. Again, that is entirely their call. And then the last aspect of this amendment as a reporting requirement in that where the school systems do need to report just some raw data to us, not individual names, but, say X percentage of students were not legally in their school versus those that were. And so that's just to kind of get a better scope of the issue. Mr. Chairman, that is what the amendment does and what the bill does as amended. I stand ready for questions.
Okay, members, we have the bill before us properly as laid out by the sponsor. Ricky, I have you on the list for comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To make sure we get to our guests that have wanted to speak, I make a motion that we go out of session to hear them.
We have three speakers that we have assigned to speak today. Any objection to us going out of session? Representative Keem, I recognize you before I do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That timeline you gave, does that include the speakers, or is that the speakers are not part of the 6 p.m.?
No, our 6 o'clock is the motion, and that will include everybody. Hard stop.
Okay, so how much time do the speakers have?
I'm giving each speaker, let me go ahead and, without objection, we're out of session. I'm giving each speaker 3 minutes. They will come up. They'll be timed. I will have asked Latino Memphis, Mauricio Calvo, if you will come up to one of the seats, sir. We also have from Ed Trust, Jenny Mills McFerrin. Would you come up, please, and have a seat? You can sit next to Mr. Calvo or the other side. And then we have Carla McIntyre of representing Self. You're here. Okay. So without further ado, what I would like you to do, I'm going to start with Mr. Calvo first. You have 3 minutes. We will put that on the clock, and then your mic will go off at 3 minutes, and we'll go to the next person. And then after that, we will open it up to the committee to ask you questions. Mr. Calvo, state your name and who you're with for the AV.
Good afternoon, Chairman White, members of the committee. My name is Mauricio Calvo, and I am the CEO of Latino Memphis. I am a proud Mexican American who speaks ESL, that is English as a Southern language. So bear with me, y'all. Latino Memphis fully supports the legal and moral arguments against this bill. However, today I want to highlight 7 crucial unknowns, some of them listed on the fiscal note, uncertainties that make it clear why we should consider pausing and reconsider moving forward. These unanswered questions carry real consequences, and rushing this decision could lead to unintended harm, not only for children, but for all Tennesseans. Number 1, we do not know if schools can verify and process these requirements. As a former school board member, I can tell you that they probably cannot. Schools lack the training, resources, and potentially the legal authority to do this. We cannot expect 17,000 schools across Tennessee to do this in the next 5 months. We do not know how much it will cost taxpayers to defend this bill all the way to the Supreme Court. Even though some of you may want to do that, ironically, this bill claims to be saving money. We do not know the impact on budgets, particularly in small rural districts, where schools are often the largest employer in the county. We do not know how this law will conflict with truancy laws. We kind of know the long term of not educating kids. We also don't know how many families will leave Tennessee if their children are pushed out of school. While some maybe have that as a goal, the true economic impact of a shrinking force in Tennessee may not be good. We don't know how much we spend on ESL. How many ESL students are immigrants? How many are US citizens? Let's get accurate data before we make policy. My own kids were ESL students in Memphis public schools at one point. When I was a US citizen, when I was not a US citizen, but they were. But today, Anna is at Washington University, and Carolina is a senior at a charter school on her way to Davidson College. This success is not just theirs, it's Tennessee's. This is what happens when we invest in education. Good policy is not just about ideas, it's about execution. Right now, this committee has its hands full. Vouchers, ELA interventions, significant reforms. Along so much, this would feel rushed with so many unknowns. So let's do the smart thing. Let's press pause. I offer Latino Memphis and myself to work with all of you and ask you that we can find constructive solutions. Let's study the actual impact and the potential solutions before we decisions we might regret. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calvo. Appreciate that. I am now going to go to Ed Trust. Ms. McFerrin, you're recognized. Name and position for the audiovisual.
Sure. I'm Jenny Mills McFerrin. I'm the Assistant Director of Policy and Research at EdTrust Tennessee. Chairman White, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. For the last 15 years, I've been doing education, research, and policy analysis in Tennessee, and I'm proud to serve as the Assistant Director of Policy and Research at EdTrust Tennessee, a nonpartisan education advocacy organization committed to ensuring that every child in Tennessee has access to a high-quality public education. That vision isn't possible with House Bill 793. The sponsors of this bill have stated their intent to overturn longstanding legal precedent guaranteeing every child access to public education regardless of immigration status. If passed, this bill could deprive undocumented students in Tennessee schools of their right to learn. What happens when thousands of children are locked out of classrooms? What would it look like for Tennessee to have thousands of students in our communities who never learn to read? And if students are not in school, where will they be? Much of the discussion on this bill has centered on the cost of educating English learners, but it's important to underscore that English learners and undocumented students are not the same. 2/3 of Tennessee's English learners are U.S. citizens. Conflating undocumented students and English learners gives the impression this bill would extend to many more students than what is included in the language of the bill. However, there are significant fiscal impacts to this bill that should be considered. The fiscal note states this bill would put Tennessee in violation of the Civil Rights Act, jeopardizing at least $1.1 billion in essential federal education funding. Voting yes on this bill could threaten critical resources for our schools, educators, and students. Beyond the financial consequences, schools should be safe places focused on learning. Research shows that policies targeting immigrant students harm all students. When students come to school afraid of immigration enforcement, we see higher absenteeism, declines in English and math achievement, and increased dropout rates. Teachers struggle to teach when their students are anxious, distracted, or grieving the sudden loss of a friend. These effects are felt by students across the school community. National polling indicates across party lines, Americans agree that schools should be safe, welcoming places for all children. This bill has the potential to do significant harm to our students and takes our focus from what matters, ensuring all children have access to high-quality public schools that prepare them for the opportunities and demands of an increasingly complex world. Tennessee can do better. I urge you to reject this harmful legislation and instead focus on policies that support all of our students. When our students succeed, Tennessee succeeds.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. McFerrin. Our third speaker is Carla, am I pronouncing McIntyre correctly?
Correct.
Are you representing yourself?
Yes.
Or are you representing Turk?
I'm representing myself.
Okay, not Turk. Okay, you recognize, state your name and position for the audiovisual record.
So good afternoon, Chairman White and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak today regarding HB 793. My name is Carla McIntyre, and like many of you, I care deeply about education. Being here today is a full circle moment. I spent my late teens and 20s within the halls of the Legislative Plaza advocating for my education. At the heart of my educational journey is my mom, a domestic violence survivor who, through the grace of God, had the courage to immigrate to the U.S. and gave her 2 daughters a chance at survival. As a former undocumented student from a mixed immigration status family, there was no clear avenue for legal status for me. If HB 793 had been in effect during my K through 12 years, my mom would not have been able to afford tuition, and I would have not had the freedom to learn, and I would have discontinued my studies. Thankfully, this was not the case. Because my teachers and my community believed in my right to education, I strived for excellence, and I worked hard to strengthen my educational opportunities. I carry with me today 3 diplomas: my high school diploma, an Associate of Arts degree, and a bachelor's degree, each earned through hard work. These diplomas are a testament to the importance of education in shaping our future and having the growth of our state. because after 17 years of being undocumented, an avenue became available to adjust my immigration status. After graduating college, I chose to give back to the community that invested so much in me, and I became an admissions counselor at Lipscomb University. Then, in 2021, with the help of organizations like the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition and Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, I became a U.S. citizen. Throughout my career in higher ed, I had the privilege of helping students from across the state navigate post-secondary opportunities. I've seen the eagerness of our young people to learn and contribute to society. Every day, my husband, an elementary physical education teacher who joins me here today, and I step out the door with a shared commitment to serve our community to the best of our ability. Together, we've had the honor of serving over 5,000 students throughout our careers. Our mission as educators, just like yourselves, has always been clear: to ensure that every child has access to a world-class education, regardless of their immigration status. I know when you look at our guests here today, you don't know about the immigration status, but I know in your heart you wish for them to have a world-class education. HB 793 goes against the core values that we uphold as educators. I urge you to vote no and consider how we can work together to move our state forward by championing the next generation. Because people believe in me, I was then able to believe and help others. Thank you for letting me speak today.
And let's make sure we keep our signs down in front of our chest where the people behind their view is not blocked. I'm going to open it now to the committee to ask questions of that, but let me start with the first one, and I'll address that to Mr. Calvo. Ms. McIntyre made a statement about, as she was going through K through 12, there was no clear legal status or pathway for her. And so my concern is, if you can give me any kind of understanding on this, as you know, I carried the DACA bill for those 4 years. And I hated to see that when you graduated from 12th grade, you still had no clear pathway, and therefore you couldn't go into higher education in this country or the state unless you had the in-state tuition. So what is the answer between, there's no clear pathway early on, no clear pathway after graduation? Do you have any comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for the record, I'm not an immigration attorney, but I've been doing this work for many years to understand enough and my own experience. So I'll give you an example. It took me 25 years to become an American citizen after I arrived here. So as the young person said, oftentimes families come from a mixed status. Sometimes they can become citizens through marriage. Sometimes things change in the law. And I have heard the argument that it would be immoral to allow somebody to get an education and not be able to work. However, it would be immoral to cut their wings because circumstances do change. Policies do change over years. People apply to temporary status, visas. I mean, the immigration code is so big and so complex that expecting our schools to be able to determine who is in, who is not, who is in the process, it will be just so complicated. So to answer your question, it is such a highly dysfunctional system, and we acknowledge the immigration system is broken. What we should be doing is finding solutions for that. But right now, there is a possibility, as we just heard one of the witnesses, for somebody to come into this country under one status and 1, 2, or 17 years later change that status for the better.
Thank you. Representative Johnson, recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, that just, sorry, it makes me think of more questions. But when I want to be really simple and go to the oath that I took, the oath of office here that says, I will not propose or assent to any bill, vote, or resolution which shall appear to me injurious to the people, or consent to any act or thing whatever that shall have a tendency to lessen or abridge their rights and privileges. And so for me, do you, as someone who is on a school board, someone working with Ed Trust, someone who's gone through our system, do you consider refusing students being able to attend public schools? Would that be injurious to school-age children?
Mr. Calvo, you're recognized. Or whoever wants to answer. Was you directed that towards anyone particular? Ms.
I wanted to hear from all three. Is this injurious to the people?
Oh, it would be, I mean, I took an oath of office too, and I'm no longer on the school board, but it would be really bad. Yes. I mean, it would be like discriminating somebody who has a disability because they are too expensive for the system.
Ms. McFerrin?
Yes.
Let's keep the discussion going. Ms. McFerrin?
Yes, it would be really harmful thinking about all that the experience of going to school gives kids, their ability to make friends and social connections, their ability to learn critical skills. So it would be really injurious.
Ms. McIntyre?
Yes, I agree. And I think it also prevents from moving our state forward. And as representatives, we want to make sure, as previous educators, that we offer everyone the opportunity, all children the opportunity to be in the classroom. So yes, I agree with.
Thank you. I'll give you one follow-up.
Yeah, and that puts me back in my classroom. I taught at Central High School in Knoxville, and we had a large population of ELL students now. But, you know, I cannot tell you how enriching that was to everybody in that school, because my students had behavioral issues and some mental health issues. But to see my students be able to work with some of the ELL students and help them with the language, and then my kids who didn't always do great at academics felt so good about themselves because they were able to work with these other students and share their language and learn about each other's communities. And, you know, it did more for my students than I could say so many other things, because it just enriched everything that both of the groups learned. And there's nothing that can replace that experience. And I would hate to see that go by the wayside. Because the reality is, we know that undocumented immigrants in this state contribute, according to American Immigration Council, $915 million in taxes. That was in 2023. That's almost $1 billion, which would easily educate and well beyond every immigrant in this state. We can afford it. They do contribute to our economy. Is that what you see as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Any other direct questions? Now I'm going to move on. Okay. Reverend Kinsey, you have a question to our panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, you know, as I try to get my arms around what this bill would look like, you know, I try to envision, okay, this bill passes, and I'll ask you all to help me. You know, even with it being permissive per se, if 10% of our counties, if you pick let's pick Shelby County. If the counties around Shelby choose to exercise this bill and ends up being 10,000 children from kindergarten through 12th graders are now kind of released. Do you think the families will stay in those counties? Will they move into Shelby if Shelby doesn't have this harmful policy in front of them? Or do you think they'll pay tuition to go to school in these counties? What do you think that environment would look like 3 years, 4 years down the line if this legislation were to pass?
Who'd you direct the question to?
Any of them any or all.
I'll take a quick shot. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the question. I would imagine that they will actually move out of the state. And as I said earlier, although some may wish that was the case, let's remember that this economy depends on migrant workers doing many things, but including construction, agricultural, hospitality, janitorial, and light manufacturing and others. So we are going to lose the tax base, and we're also going to lose workforce. And I think that's something that all of you will have to explain to your constituents when those projects cannot get done. So I would imagine that people are just not going to move counties. They'll probably just move to another state. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to respond?
I
Ms. McFerrin?
would. I think So there's the language of the bill, but there's also the stated intent to overturn the longstanding legal precedent that would deny children, not just in Tennessee, but across the country, access to education. And so I think it's important to consider that broader impact of this legislation in this discussion. You know, what would it look like for students, not just outside Shelby County, but across the country, to be denied access to school, access to classrooms, access to fundamental skills? So I think that really is one of the questions with this bill.
Thank you.
That
You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman White. I think for me, that was a very point to my story. My mom, I came from a mixed status, so I had siblings that were U.S. citizens. My mom was on a path to residency that I wasn't on. And so she would have not been able to afford tuition, and I would have had to drop classes and not continue my education as a middle schooler or a high schooler. And that, again, would have prevented me of helping so many students in our state apply for colleges and helping them navigate through that. And so it's not just that one student, but it's just the impact that they would contribute to our state if we allow this bill to pass.
Thank you.
Thank you. President Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my questioning was somewhat along the same lines as my colleagues. And the way I was going to phrase it is what you see as unintended consequences of a bill of this nature. And not just from the physical piece. You know, money is a big deal for government. But the impact on young people who are here, who are striving to move forward, and in a sense of speaking, the carpet will be pulled out from under them. So what do you see as some of the unintended consequences of a bill of this nature?
Would you like to address that to any particular one?
We'll start down the line, if you would, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Mr. Calvo?
Thank you, thank you, Representative. When I was on the school board, I tried to make decisions that my kids would be proud of. I wouldn't like to be sitting in a place that, as she mentioned, that we are setting the precedent to the country to deny education. I want to be able to tell my kids later on that I voted on the right side of history and the right side of the bill. So that is an unintended consequence besides the money that at some point I'm going to have to face my kid and my creator and said, you know, I was part of frankly what it seems like a very discriminatory racist bill.
You recognize Ms. McFerrin?
I'd like to talk a little bit about what the research shows the effects on all students in schools would be, because again, this proposal would impact undocumented students, but their classmates would really seriously feel the effects of this. I've already talked about increased absenteeism, decreased student achievement. I also think we know this causes a lot of fear and stress for students. One study found that classes experience grief as though a classmate has died when all of a sudden the student is no longer there and no one knows what happened to him or her. I'd also say we know from the research that these effects are felt throughout the school community, and one population of students that feel it more deeply are students with disabilities who particularly experience worsened school climate and safety following increased immigration enforcement activity.
Thank you. Ms. McIntyre?
Yeah. And I feel like what both of my colleagues next to my right said, it does create that emotional and that value that we uphold, that we really want all children to have an education. And that's the unintended consequence, is that we would be telling people, as I'm looking at making eye contact with y'all in our hearts, that no, you don't deserve an education. And I think that is just an unintended consequence that's going to be hard to sleep at night and know that it happened.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Boso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question's for Mr. Calvo. You mentioned just a moment ago, Mr. Calvo, that in your view, this bill is discriminatory and racist. Let me ask you this. Don't you agree that the state of Tennessee has a legitimate interest in distinguishing between persons who are here lawfully and those who are not?
Mr. Calvo?
Representative, I don't believe so. The supremacy clause in the Constitution establishes that it is the job of the federal government to make that distinction and to put that enforcement. So we simply just don't have the jurisdiction to enforce immigration law. And again, it is the role, just like we're not supposed to deliver the mail, the post service, that's the job of the post service, whether we like it or not, whether we think that they do a good job or not. We're not going to create an alternative system. So the state shouldn't be on the immigration system. I agree with you. The system is broken, and we have the right to look out for the state. But data after data shows that immigrants contribute more than what they take away. So we are financially, we do contribute, and legally, we simply don't have the jurisdiction to enforce the immigration law. My opinion, but the law's opinion too.
Thank you. We're having a little trouble hearing when you snap, so I know you want to show your support, but keep the snapping down so we can have a good discussion and hear what they're saying. So, Representative Calvo, Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Calvo, the fact is that there are those of us on this committee who believe in the rule of law. We love children, all children, regardless of immigration status. But we also want to have our Constitution properly interpreted. And the simple fact of the matter is that what the Supreme Court did in Plyler versus Doe was an abomination. It completely misread the Equal Protection Clause. Even though illegal aliens are neither a suspect class nor is education a fundamental right under the U.S. Constitution. So in fairness, wouldn't you agree that those of us who support the rule of law and who support the Constitution can do so without being discriminatory or racist?
Mr. Calvo.
I do agree with you. I support the rule of law, and the law in the books today is the decision of the Supreme Court.
Members, audience. Representative Boso, you follow up? Is that you finished?
Just one final thought,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, and that is that what the sponsor of this bill is doing, as evidenced by the first several recital clause, is to pass this bill to bring it back before the United States Supreme Court so that it can accurately pass on the question of whether the Equal Protection Clause actually provides the same rights that Justice Brennan in a narrow majority decided in 1982, 5-4, was actually in the Constitution. And from my perspective, it's time for the current U.S. Supreme Court that understands how to read text to pass on this issue and support the sponsor, Leader Lamberth, in his effort to do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boso. And my error, I was distracted by the audience and I thought you were still speaking. I didn't give you a second follow-up. I was just distracted. Okay, we have Representative Johnson. You had another comment on the panel. You recognize?
Yes, my frustration at,
Stay on
there
the
are
bill.
certainly Supreme Court decisions some of us don't like, but that doesn't mean it's not the current law of the land. And just because you don't like a particular, I can name some if you'd like to hear them of the ones that I don't like. But right now we are following law and order because that is the current law of our country.
Thank you. I have no one else on the list. If not, I'm going to go back in session where we can have the committee talk to the sponsor and ask questions. Seeing no objection, thank you all so very much. We're now back in session. Appreciate your involvement and participation. Representative Baum, you had your on the list a while ago. You're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman White. And Leader Lamberth, currently we do pay to educate undocumented children, but we don't finance benefits in the form of Social Security retirement benefits for undocumented folks here, Medicare, food stamps, unemployment compensation, even our Freedom Accounts bill. And so I guess what I'm wondering is whether maybe we currently have the right mix of policy in that we're not serving as a magnet for illegal immigration because we don't provide a lot of benefits that citizens get. And I've just mentioned 4 or 5, food stamps, Medicare, Social Security. But we do educate the children. So at the same time that we're not putting an additional burden on the taxpayers who are citizens, because we're not funding a lot of these other government benefits, we're not doing that in a way to hurt children. And so I guess my question is it possible that the current mix here, where we don't provide most government services for those who are undocumented, but we do provide an education for children, may be the right mix?
Leader Lambert?
Thank you, Chairman Baum. That's exactly kind of the point here, is that in Plyler v. Doe, the U.S. Supreme Court did something they'd never done before, and quite frankly haven't done since. They did not extend any other benefits to these particular children, to these students. They're not eligible for TennCare. They're not eligible for a variety of federal or state benefits because they are illegally present. That's just a fact. And so this bill strikes a balance of letting each LEA make that decision. And as my colleague from Knox County said, if one county decides that they are going to check immigration status and charge tuition, and the county right next door says, you know what, we have the capacity to be able to handle however many children that want to come here, regardless of whether they're legally present or not, then it absolutely creates a scenario where one county may have an influx of students and another county an outflux. And that's for each county to decide. That's what this bill allows for. And so I think that's a good mix. The way it is done now, where after Plyler, I mean, each state, they took that out of the state's hands and they took that out of each LEA's hands. If you have 3 students that are in a school, if this bill were to pass and withstands legal challenge, and a school district checked immigration status and they had 3 students out of 30,000 that were illegally there, they may say, you know what, we can handle that. It's not a problem. But if it was 30% of their incoming kindergarten class or 30% of their school, they may make a very different decision and say, look, we've got to charge some tuition here because that's not fair to the remaining students to have classrooms that are overfilled, to have an enormous number of ELL students at that juncture, to simply not be able to serve both those new students and the ones that were currently there. So that's what this gives, is that local authority that they should have been allowed to continue to have if Plyler had not been decided, in my opinion, incorrectly.
Chairman Bond?
And I think for my follow-up question, I'd like to talk about the discretionary nature of the bill, where school districts have the option to change their policy. They have the option to charge for undocumented children to attend the schools. It sounds like if they did change their policies, this could draw a lawsuit as in some type of violation of federal law. School boards generally are less political than maybe the Tennessee General Assembly or county commissions. A lot of school boards would rather not wade into these battles. They might rather have the state or even the federal government tell them what to do without having to make this decision on their own. But if a school board did decide to change their policy and this drew some kind of legal challenge, that school board or that local government would be potentially faced with fighting that legal challenge. They could incur a lot of costs. It seems like a lot of local school districts wouldn't be willing to take that risk. Could you comment on whether the discretionary nature is really something that would enable local school districts to actually challenge a federal Supreme Court decision?
Leader Lambert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And on page 5 of the amendment, we address just that. So this would be a state law. We don't want any LEA to be, shouldering that on their own. And so on that page, there is an appellate process that would go to TDOE. That's there for 2 reasons. One, to make sure that the local district got it right, that if they are saying a child is illegally here in the United States and has not paid the tuition that they would require in that circumstance, and again, it's totally up to them as to whether or not to do that, then that family, that parent, has an opportunity to appeal to TDOE. Now, because this is a state law and that appellate process is in there, the litigants that would be involved would be that individual family and the state of Tennessee.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Sapicki? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In going back and reviewing this information about this decision in 1982, at the current time, the Supreme Court was looking at potential undocumented immigration in the United States at roughly $200,000 people a year. The current numbers we have are almost 200,000 people a month. And Sandra Day O'Connor made a comment in the dissent that the federal government has to get a handle on immigration or we'll reach critical mass. You fast forward to today and looking at just the raw numbers here. In 2021 budgetary year in the state of Tennessee, there were 61,000 English language learners, and we were budgeting $235 million a year to educate those English language learners. In the budget we're contemplating right now, 86,000 English language learners at a cost of $330 million to the state of Tennessee. But if you delve deeper into the numbers, 231 million of that is state dollars, but now $70 million is from the local taxing authority, your county commissions, the people who live in those districts. One could argue, by listening back to what Sandra Day O'Connor said back in 1982, because of immigration policy at the federal level that we have no jurisdiction over, but under Plyer v. Doe, we bear the cost of that decision. That is an unfunded mandate from the federal government requiring us to handle the problems that they've created at the border here for us. To the sponsor, if this bill would pass and the governor signs it into law, do you anticipate, because it'd be in direct violation of a Supreme Court ruling, that this would be enjoined into courts immediately?
Peter Lambert.
I would certainly hope not, but it is definitely a possibility. If someone were to bring suit, again, there's an appellate process. I think this bill is very fair. Again, the parents of the students that are looking to enroll in these schools didn't go through the lawful process to get here. They skipped the line. They went in front of others that are trying to come here lawfully. The federal immigration process is absolutely broken, and that is something, hear me loud and clear, that our federal counterparts in Congress and the President of the United States needs to address. I met with a fantastic group of young people earlier today, and one of the things I mentioned to them is that through multiple administrations, both Republican and Democrat, through multiple changeovers of power in Congress, the federal government has avoided forming an immigration process that is both fair and reasonable to those that are coming to this country. But it is a process. It is a process that some of the folks that even testified today have gone through. The families that we are talking about, the parents that we are talking about, have absolutely gone around that process. And I'm sure they have very valid reasons on why they feel like they needed to do that. But now what has happened, we are at that critical mass that was referenced in 1982. Every state has become a border state. And unfortunately, policies like this do create a magnet in certain areas and a disincentive for folks to actually go through the lawful process. What I want, and I would hope all of us would want, is a lawful, reasonable process at the federal level for the world's best and brightest to be able to come here to this country and do that legally, so that every one of these students that you've heard testified about today, every one of these students has an actual pathway to be a lawful American citizen and then contribute to the highest possible degree. And I heard the chairman mention this earlier. One of the things that is so disappointing about the way the federal immigration system works right now is, let's just say either this bill failed or it got enjoined in court. These children will remain in school at no additional tuition, and we'll take resources away from other students. But when they graduate, they are not employable. They will unfortunately have to live in the shadows the rest of their days until some sort of a pathway for citizenship arises. Because if it doesn't, they will not be paid the wages. They will not be able to obtain the licensure. They will not be able to obtain an actual legal job. And that's not fair to them either. So again, there's lots of problems that need to be addressed at the federal level. For us here, I just want to make sure that each district has the ability to be able to check immigration status, just like they check residency status, to determine whether or not that child and that student lives within their jurisdiction.
Chairman Spicky.
Currently, the federal government identifies free and reduced lunch, and they will pay to feed the children that are in our school systems. But under Plyer v. Doe, they put us in a situation where they won't pay for these students that are in our school systems that are causing this undue burden in our states and our states across the country. And what we're asking is, and what I see the potential here is, I believe this bill will be enjoined if it passes. And I believe the Supreme Court's going to have to take a long look at not only Plyer v. Doe, but I think it's going to trigger the federal government to look at federal immigration policy. And if Plyer v. Doe would happen to stand, maybe the federal government will finally step up and say, we'll send the states the money to be able to fund these students. We have to get a handle on this moving forward. And I don't see another trigger here unless we challenge Plyer v. Doe in the courts to get to bring what Sandra Day O'Connor said as critical mass to a vote here of the Supreme Court of whether or not they made the right decision back then. Remember this, when you go to higher education, you're asked if you're a US citizen. If you check the box no, you don't qualify for HOPE, you don't qualify for Promise, you don't qualify for Reconnect, you don't qualify for Wilder NAFI, you don't qualify for the scholarships that the state has to offer to these students. I agree with you, Leader Lambert, that the federal government needs to act, and they needed to act about 40 years ago. We have to bring this to the forefront. This argument must be brought to the forefront of national politics so that we can finally put this issue to bed. And if it's going to be a mandate from the federal government that we have to educate everybody who shows up because we're not allowed to ask their immigration status, under that unfunded mandate by the federal government, we have a right to say you have to fund these students then and take the burden off the taxpayers in these local municipalities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, one second. Let me let the, no, okay, you're recognized, Representative Hakeem.
Mr. Chairman, you talk about staying on the bill, and I think we've sort of went off of that. And so I'm asking, when it comes around to me and maybe my other colleagues, please don't start talking about stay on the bill when what I just heard was anything but on the bill. Thank you.
I followed the conversation. I thought he was making a good point about the bill. So, but we'll move forward. Okay, I've got Representative Glenn. Leader, did I overlook you? Okay. Representative Glenn, I'm going to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find it amazing that we're talking about budgets and vouchers when we just gave away $424 million to private institutions for vouchers. So I really wish we would stop that conversation, but let's stay on the bill. Sponsor, is it the parent responsibility to ensure that their child is legal?
Leader Lambert.
So it's 7.8 billion is the number you were looking for, 7.8 billion that we spend on public education in our state each year, K through 12 education. To your question, not your comments, it is absolutely the responsibility of every single person that is coming into the United States to make every effort to come here legally.
Representative Glenn. No outburst. Warning one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if it's the parents' responsibility to ensure that their kids are legal, but yet we're going to punish the child for the parent not being, even though they've done everything they're supposed to do and the system is broke. So we're going to punish the child by not allowing them to go to school. Then it's really surprising, because when I look back in history and I think about the things that have happened, should we punish you for the things that your family did?
Leader Lambert, you would like to respond to that?
Representative Glenn, I know you went through a spirited campaign last year that your family was brought into.
That you attacked my family.
I don't think we need to go there.
You attacked my family, so let's go.
I understand your issue with me.
Representative McKenzie, turn around. There's one chairman, turn around. Representative Glenn, keep your comments on the bill. I will instruct him also. I will instruct him also, stay on the bill. Stay, sir. Representative Glenn. That's enough. That's enough. Okay, we're going to Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sponsor, I've got a few questions. I told you earlier that I'd ask you a couple of things. I want to first reference the fiscal note that talks about that this proposed legislation may result in a decrease to the TISA funding to the school system, which would be caused by the disenrollment of these students. And I just wanted to reconcile that with the Education Freedom Scholarship Act that we passed in January, which was supposed to create a maintenance of effort that would not allow for any reduction in state funding. Can you talk to that, please?
Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you for bringing that up because I too disagree with just the language of this. Fiscal review is an independent entity. And if we're fortunate enough for this to pass this committee and go to finance, I hope that we have that conversation there because due to the bill that passed during the special session, the Education Freedom Act, is no school can lose money simply for disenrollment, regardless of the reason. And so if there's disenrollment due to this bill or any other, then it should not cost any local school district any state funds.
Follow up, Representative Barrett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you'll bear with me, I do have a few. So my question then on that subject in particular, Leader, is are these children that are currently enrolled in the public schools that are maybe determined later to be here illegally, are they being counted currently for TISA funding purposes as being enrolled in the school system?
I'm going to recognize Leader Lambert, but I will come back to you for follow-up. I've got other people. That's
Yes,
your
sir.
question. I'll come back to you for the follow-up. Leader Lambert.
Yes.
Okay, Representative McKenzie. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we all heard it here today what this bill is really about. This is a bully bill to try to undo the law of the land that the sponsor and several other members think that they can because they have a soft Supreme Court, they think. We have, for over 40 years, abided by this decision, not because of the other things. You don't get TennCare, you don't get all the other benefits, Social Security as a sponsor says, but we've abided by this because it's the right thing. We should not put our children, the least of us, those that cannot do for themselves, in the middle of an adult battle. And this is a bully bill doing that. My first question to you, sponsor, is 2/3 of the ELL students have a U.S. birth certificate because they were born here, but they cannot prove that they're documented. What are you going to do to those students?
Leader Lambert, your address then.
Make sure they get one of the finest educations in the nation. That is our goal in every single one of those students. They are legally citizens of this country. They are legally residents of their district, and they are entitled to, under our Tennessee Constitution, which actually is the law of the land, which is also what the U.S. Constitution is, which is also what Congress passes in the U.S. statutes, and what we pass into those green books just over your shoulder there in the Tennessee state law. A Supreme Court decision is just that, a decision. It is binding until it is overturned by future court. We have seen an ebb and flow of that over the almost 250 years of this country. And this decision itself was not ruled on properly, in my humble opinion. I think the court would change their mind and be more friendly to the 10th Amendment, which is absolutely a part of what we all, at least would endeavor to, I hope, put the government closest to the people where it is best suited. I mean, those children that you've referenced are U.S. citizens. They absolutely have a right to an education in those schools. And quite frankly, when you have folks, again, that are illegally here, it takes funds, resources, and time away from those very children.
Okay, you have to follow up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you've been around for a lot of this conversation today has been talking about coming over legally, talking about the fact that our systems, walls, borders are broken. Those parents are here illegally, but you're saying that, I think I heard you say today that those children are fine. How would a birth certificate, because all we have here is a birth certificate. If the person was born in France, Guatemala, or Port-au-Prince, they only get one birth certificate. How would that birth certificate verify to that school administrator, secretary? You're going to hire immigration lawyers per every school. How would that one document verify that this person is here legally? What will you do with that document? Will you start using that? Will you call all of those students' parents and make them produce legal documents? How will that one document satisfy or cause you to purge that student out of a system?
Leader Lambert.
Thank you. And on page 3 of the amendment, it lays it out very clearly. It doesn't actually list birth certificate. It says, notwithstanding any law to the contrary, an LEA or public charter may require school-age students who seek to enroll in the LEA or public charter to produce documentation establishing that the student is a citizen of the United States, which a U.S. birth certificate would do, is in the process of obtaining citizenship, which was testified to by some of the witnesses earlier on what that process looks like, or holds a legal immigration or visa status, which is the other way that would be proven.
Thank you. If you got more questions, I come back to you. Just raise your hand. Let us know. Let me now go to Representative Hakeem. You're next on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, looking at the documents dealing with the fiscal note, one of the things it said is this proposed legislation may jeopardize federal funding to the state and to local government. And talks about a number of unknowns and so forth. So that can't be finalized, a final statement. And what I'm also looking at is that the children that we're talking about, by the Constitution, by the civil rights laws of this nation, being able to get an education applies to them. But we're saying that because they're undocumented immigrants, that it does not apply to them. I'm just going by what the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, discrimination protections in Title VI apply to undocumented individuals in the United States. Now, we also talked about, and I guess in its own way, it bothers me that we've got different figures coming from different individuals. And I really wonder if we should use the Comptroller's office to come up with what the real numbers are. The numbers I have say 10,000 students who are undocumented in this state out of 1 million students if we're dealing with K through 12 in the state of Tennessee. But the way we're talking, this 10,000 is going to break the system, so to speak. And that math is not coming together for me. So I guess my question is it better to have an entity like the Comptroller's office to take figures from all these different areas that we're getting numbers from before we conclude that there's such a great burden on our state for these students to be educated?
Leader Lambert, your response?
Thank you. And that is part of the issue, is that a school can't force someone to provide the very documentation that we're talking about in this bill right now. And so getting an actual number is difficult because they simply can't require that type of documentation currently. That is part of the holding in Plyler v. Doe. You just can't force that type of documentation. That is, I hope, what each school district would take into account when they get that information. Again, the analogy I gave earlier, if you have a school system of 30,000 students, I can't recall how many in yours, but it's a rather large school system. And ours is as well. If you had 3 students that were illegally present in the United States, then the school system may just say, you know what, that's not an undue burden to us. We can handle those 3 students and as well educate all the other children well. But again, if that number was 30% of the student body, that's a different equation for that local school district on whether or not they can really provide a good education to all of the students there. Also, just for what it's worth, I mean, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it mentions that in the fiscal note, and it's very purposeful on that, is that it prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs. This doesn't. What we are talking about is whether or not that includes someone who is illegally present in the United States. It's not national origin that matters. It matters whether you are legally here on what this bill would apply to and whether or not a school district can then charge tuition for a child and a student and a family in most circumstances there that is not legally present in the United States.
You have a follow-up, sir.
Once again, there's a difference in our understanding of what's in black and white. Now, what I see here says that it applies to undocumented individuals in the United States, meaning the children. And is it better to have accurate information from an entity like the Comptroller's Office than, you know, your figure's supposed to be better than mine? And just have, that was my question, as to whether the Comptroller's Office can compile the information that we're all asking about, as opposed to your information or my information is supposed to be perceived better than the other person.
Leader Lambert?
That's the issue. They can't right now because there's no way to get that information. I mean, you can make estimates, they can do their best, but because you can't require the documentation, people can only make just kind of estimates on that. Now, I will say, in the part that you reference in the fiscal note, it says, according to the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, there's new leadership there now. I have a feeling that interpretation to be a bit different.
Thank you. If you have another question, you get back on the list. Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you discussing your frustration at the federal level for not having that immigration policy in place. I know I share that, and probably most people on this committee also share that frustration with you. What I don't understand and what I can't connect is because of that frustration, we're taking it out on 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds, and we're taking it out on children. And what I see is we have a government now that has the presidency, a majority in Congress and a majority in the Senate, and they could actually sit down at the table and write some policy so that people can come here, to work and do all that, and we wouldn't have to do this. It's rare that you have that sort of trifecta where you can write policy. I don't see anybody sitting down to write policy to make this possible. What I see, mass deportation is not immigration policy, and it's not helping us to do these goals that we have here of having a path so these kids who are here can't attend school. So because we're frustrated with something that's happening in DC, we're taking it out on children who just want to learn. And it does not make sense to me. It doesn't make sense that schools are going to have to hire an immigration attorney. Have you ever been in the office when folks are bringing in their stuff to register for school? God bless that school secretary who is trying to wade through this stuff. They're not an immigration expert. They don't know how to determine what all these different papers mean. It's just not feasible. Undocumented immigrants bring $1 billion into the state every year. More than enough, far more than is ever needed to educate them. So one question I have that you mentioned when you were talking about the amendment having the addition of of the being able to pay. And so my question about that legally is our Constitution, our Tennessee Constitution says kids must attend free public schools. So would that be a contradiction even of our own Constitution?
Leader Lambert?
That goes to the core of Plyler. I mean, because what they found in that particular instance was that while those students were illegally present in the United States, it came down to a question of jurisdiction. And so if it's the same issue if a student is in Davidson County and wishes to attend Sumner County or vice versa, or was in Knox County and wished to attend school in any other surrounding county, if you don't have a residency in that other county and you can't prove that, then there's a tuition that is normally charged if they have the capacity to be able to handle that child. That's the exact same thing we're doing here. And so again, if a child in Robertson County wanted to attend Sumner County schools, they do not have the residency to be able to do so, but they could pay a tuition if there was room within the school to be able to do so.
You have a follow-up?
These kids have residency in the county.
Leader Lambert?
But they are not legally present in the United States, and that's the crux of the issue.
Speaking to the mic, that's not a back and forth. Okay. We have now gone through the list once. I'm going to go back to those who had a second question. Keep your questions tight. We're down to 20 minutes. So Representative Barrett, I recognize you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question and a follow-up, just like we've been doing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Leader, in the previous exchange we had, you acknowledged that these students are counted for enrollment for TISA formula funding. You also acknowledged that the Education Freedom Scholarship Act prohibits a reduction in funding for disenrollment of students. So my question is, this bill will not reduce the cost to the state by removing these students from public schools. Is that not correct?
Leader Lambert?
So what it would potentially do is that under the Education Freedom Act, and again, Fiscal Review is an independent agency. I mean, I trust their evaluation and I need to have that conversation with them because like what you noticed in that, I noticed the same thing in the fiscal note. But if there is disenrollment within a jurisdiction, they cannot lose the amount of state funding that they are getting. So if you have disenrollment within whatever jurisdiction due to this bill or anything else, quite frankly, that then provides a greater amount per pupil spending for that district, and the district does better. Because if you were to lose students through disenrollment for whatever reason, they move or anything, then the amount can't go down that your district got from the state. And so your per pupil funding can go from $7,300 per pupil to maybe $7,500 or $7,700 is how that would basically work.
Follow up, Representative.
But it's not reducing the cost to the state of what we're spending for those students. So my follow-up question is this. Several years ago, this body had a issue with another Supreme Court case, and we passed a law that had a trigger to that law, that it would not go into effect unless Roe versus Wade was overturned. Have you considered putting a trigger in this law that would not go into effect unless Plyler versus Doe was overturned?
You recognize, Leader.
Yes, that was discussed early on. And what the triggering mechanism would basically be on this, because it's completely discretionary to each LEA, is an LEA deciding that based on their circumstances, they feel like they would like to take advantage of this particular bill. And then for an appeal to come from that to TDOE. And that, in essence, would be what would trigger any type of legal maneuverings on this. And then we went over it goes from there. Again, my hope would be the courts would find this, would uphold this, because while there may not be a significant cost increase to the state or cost decrease, and I think there could be through a variety of other programs, by the way, not just the per pupil spending, but for each particular district, there's a significant cost. So the more students you have, obviously, the more teachers you need, the more school buildings you need, the more school buses that you need, the more SROs you need, though that is partially borne by the state. You see what I mean? I mean, there's just, there's a lot of other expenses there beyond even what the state takes care of.
Thank you. Chairman speaking, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader, looking at the bill, the amendment on page 3. Let me know when you're ready. You ready, sir? On page 3, I want you to clarify, because we've had a lot of discussion about identification or citizenship. Could you just walk us through one time, our 1A required school age students right there, and walk us through that, please?
You recognize, sir?
Again, it's very straightforward. It says an LEA or public charter school may require school-age students who seek to enroll in the LEA or public charter school to produce documentation establishing that the student is a citizen of the United States, is in the process of obtaining citizenship, or holds a legal immigration or visa status. That's just how that works. I mean, it is right there, as was said earlier, in black and white.
You have follow-up?
Yes, sir. So to clarify, this is totally permissive on a school system. If they choose to go with status quo right now, the funding that's there for these students will be there. If they choose to go with something like this and they lose students, the same funding will be there whether those students are there or not, and therefore providing more dollars per student left in the district. Is that correct?
You recognize?
In essence, yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I look at this the fiscal note, I'm trying to understand the process for determining whether the student is, if this law is to pass, is going to be kicked out of the LEA. So in that kicking them out part, if they're not able to do these things, well, as they submit these documents, what type of system do you envision, whether it's rural or urban, what type of system do you envision that the school, is this a school level vetting process to get them to either staying or leaving, or is it a system-wide process? Because I don't see a fiscal note for this, so no one's going to get paid extra. We're not hiring any new employees or anything like that. So what does this system look like if this bill is to pass?
Leader
Yeah.
Lambert?
Part of it is each district makes the decision on their own. I know I've said that several times, but it's important as part of this. I mean, at the very top of that page, it's may. So each LEA may. And so if they decide to check immigration status, then those are the three criteria that they can check. And then they can decide whether or not to require tuition to account for the additional cost for these students or not. And then if they offer an opportunity for tuition, if the family there chooses not to pay the tuition, then the school district has another opportunity to decide whether or not to enroll the student based on not paying that tuition. So at each stage that LEA has the opportunity to make a determination as to whether or not to follow through, and we give them complete control over that. So which is why in some districts they may choose not to do this at all. In other districts they may choose to go down this road, but it's entirely their call.
Follow-up, President McKenzie. You're recognized for your follow-up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and that should be a clarion call to our school system. This is looking like a 6 or 7 figure vetting process in terms of them having to hire attorneys, having to hire experts in these documents and following up with the documents. So I'm hoping our LEAs are listening. My final question that I'm able to ask is in, I don't know what, section 1 in D, you state that if a LEA chooses this, they are then, for these children, they're exempt from all compulsory school attendance and truancy intervention laws and requirements. So are you saying that they're just going to roam the streets if they can't afford tuition? If their parents still have to actually go to work to pay some of these taxes, to pay into our system, to buy eggs at whatever cost eggs cost today, are you saying that the students and the parents and the legal system, truant officer, police, are now exempt from even dealing with those kids as far as their truancy goes?
Leader Lambert?
No, so I'm saying they should become U.S. citizens or have some immigration status.
Okay. Members, we're down to 10 minutes. We'll be calling the question at 6 o'clock. I've got 4 people want to ask another question. So keep it tight so I can get there by Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From what I'm gathering here, the state of Tennessee wants to be the tip of the spear. We want to lead the charge in showing that how we feel about immigration, which is very unfortunate. When we look at the fact that we haven't accepted responsibility for creating the environment of people having to flee the countries they come from to come here. We, as a nation, played a role in the demise of the government and the economies of the countries south of the border. But we haven't accepted responsibility for that. And now we want the children to pay a price also. I think it's wrong. I think we need to step up to the plate. And if we're not going to help those countries to deal with their gang situation, the employment situation and so forth, schools, then we should stop trying to find ways in our own constitution or looking forward to the Supreme Court to overturn laws to prevent people from being educated. It's wrong. And I think we need to look at ourselves as a nation and accept the responsibility of what we did to a number of these countries. And you ask, well, what did we do? We had big businesses from America in those nations, and they plundered those countries. In addition to that, we had our CIA.
Sir, do you have a question directed to the sponsor you're going on and on? Do you have a question?
Okay. Now, you didn't interrupt my colleague in the back when he was not on the bill.
I'm asking you to direct your question. I've got 8 minutes and other people on the line. Ask the question so we can keep moving.
Forgot it.
Okay. Representative Glenn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sponsor, if this bill is permissive and LEAs can make their own decisions, then what's the purpose of them turning in numbers to the Department of Education?
Leader Lambert?
Again, I think it's important for us to know the scope of the number of children that are here illegally. It is permissive. It is absolutely permissive, but we do have state dollars that go to this, as has been mentioned by several of our colleagues, approximately $7,300 per student. And so at least to identify the scope of the problem. And again, we've had that, I would hope anyways, that would be something that from a bipartisan standpoint, we would at least want to know, look, how many students are we really talking about here?
Follow up?
No follow-up.
No follow-up. Okay, Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you. We know that every undocumented immigrant in Tennessee pays all the same taxes and actually gets fewer benefits and nothing back. So they are paying their fair share. They are contributing $1 billion to our economy. My question, though, I want to go back to the 3 descriptions you talked about, and if you could explain to me exactly what that means or what that documentation would be, which is is a citizen of the United States. So how do you see that? What does that mean?
Leader Lambert?
It means exactly what it says on the page.
Well, okay. So in theory, what does that mean? What are they going to have to bring to the school? What are they going to have to show?
Leader Lambert?
That's why this is discretionary toward each LEA, and there's an appeals process to TDOE. But I want to be crystal clear for both TDOE and local districts. It means exactly what it says on the page. No more, no less.
So number 2, the process, are they in the process of obtaining citizenship? You want me to go through all of them and then let you answer, or?
Leader Lambert, do you want to respond
It's all the
first?
same question. It's just a different category.
I can assure you the answer is going to be the same too. It means exactly what it says on the page.
All right. So then in my follow-up, what I would say
Go
is is that we are going to have to hire immigration attorneys in every school because this is going to be impossible for school personnel to decipher when they're busy as heck doing everything else that they do all day. This is just horrible disservice to public schools across Tennessee, to children across Tennessee. And again, I beg you to vote no on this bill because it is injurious to the people.
Thank you. Okay. Leader Lambert, I'm going to come to you and let you close us out.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, look, it's not been that many years ago that having a legal immigration process and cracking down on illegal immigration was a bipartisan idea. In fact, Bill Clinton, when signing a bipartisan bill to crack down on illegal immigration, said the rule of law by cracking down on illegal immigration at the border, in the workplace, and in the criminal justice system without punishing those living in the United States legally was something worthy of pursuit. Look, each LEA should be able to make their determination on their own as to whether or not they wish to check the immigration status of a student that isn't trying to enroll in that school. And then they should be able to make a determination on whether or not they can handle the intense needs of that. And then they'll be able to determine whether or not to charge the tuition or to enroll that child at all.
Question is called. Would the clerk please call the vote? Will the clerk? Madam Clerk, please call. Can you hear me? Call the vote. Put the vote on the board.
The vote. Yes.
Members,
The vote on the item.
please vote. The voting board is now open. Madam Clerk, please call the vote. Madam Clerk,
Mr.
please call the
Chairman,
vote.
you have 11 ayes and 7 nays.
Madam Chair, bill passes out the glove box. We are adjourned.